Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum. The title of this monologue is Polytheism, the gravest and the unpardonable sin. In this monologue, I am going to discuss the concept of polytheism as it is expounded in the glorious Koran with reference to 57 relevant verses so that heedful mankind may understand the types and consequences of polytheism. There are several misconceptions about this concept amongst mankind. Many people perceive that polytheism is restricted to idol worship only. However, a critical study of Quran highlights the fact that polytheism has multiple dimensions in the sight of God. As a matter of fact, the wisdom provided by Quran informs us that in the sight of God there are only two religious beliefs, that is, monotheism and polytheism. Monotheism implies belief in one God in absolute terms, while polytheism implies all other religious beliefs by whatever name they are called, such as henotheism, deism, atheism, agnosticism, and so on. All these dimensions of polytheism are fully explained in the Quran for the guidance of mankind so that they may avoid this unpardonable sin and may be saved from the eternal hellfire. The main argument provided in Quran to refute all claims of polytheism is that the Creator and the creation cannot be equal or partners in any way. This argument emanates from the primary attributes of Godhood. This is the attribute of absolute independence that can only relate to one real and eternal God. All creations are dependent upon some other source in one way or the other, while the eternal God should not be dependent upon any of his creations in any manner. The litmus test of independence is the question whether God is dependent upon some other source for its birth or creation. If the answer is in the affirmative, such a being could be a dependent creation but never a God. This potent argument affirms that all other things in heaven and earth are creations of God, so they cannot be partners to God, the only true Creator. All creations are dependent upon God, while God is not dependent on any of his creation in any matter. This fact is highlighted in chapter 7, verses 191 and 192 of Quran in the following words. It reads, God is far above the partners they set up alongside him. How can they set up with him these partners that create nothing and are themselves created, that cannot help them at all or even help themselves? Such matters of partnership may include giving life and death to anybody, deciding the variety of creations, setting the benchmark that who may be sent to heaven or hell, provision of food to all creations, interceding before God for redeeming people's sins, etc. This dependency of all creations on God excludes the possibility that they can influence God in any manner for redeeming other persons' sins. Finally, it must be remembered that polytheism in any form is the gravest and the only unpardonable sin in the sight of God. Every prudent human being should strive to avoid commission of this gravest sin under all circumstances. The best approach to avoid polytheism is to exclusively rely on the mercy of God in all matters and devote our whole life in the praise of God alone, day and night. This fact is reinforced in chapter 17, verse 44 of Quran in the following words. The seven heavens and the earth and everyone in them glorify him. There is not a single thing that does not celebrate his praise, though you do not understand their praise. He is most forbearing, most forgiving. Let's ponder over for a while and rationalize human behavior that anyone who spends time in praising a creation For example, the prophets, the saints, the holy men, etc., as part of worship instead of God, the only creator, is worthy of any mercy from God? The answer is definitely no, because he's wasting his time in doing an act that is repulsive and not approved in the sight of God. All praise is for God alone and for no one else. This fact is reinforced in numerous verses of the glorious Quran for the guidance of mankind. For example, chapter 31, verse 26 of Quran reads, "Everything in the heavens and earth belongs to God. God is self-sufficient and worthy of all praise." In its simplest form, polytheism is the belief that someone shares God's powers, and by virtue of this fact, he can influence God's decisions as a partner God. Such assumptions may manifest in several beliefs, like that a person is the son or father of God, a person is alive after death, and he is influencing worldly actions of other creations. A person can intercede before God on the judgment day to impose his will upon God, and so on. The glorious Quran refutes all claims of polytheism in a rational manner, as we will learn in this monologue. For example, chapter 13, verse 16 of Quran reads, "Say, who is Lord of the heavens and the earth? Say, God. Say, why do you take protectors other than him, who can neither benefit nor harm even themselves? Say, are the blind equal to those who can see? And are the depths of darkness equal to the light? Have the partners they assigned to God created anything like his creation, so that their creation is indistinguishable from his? Say, God is a creator of all things. He is the one, the all-compelling." This verse reinforces the belief that a creator is in the best position to determine the purpose of life of all creations. Anything that is a creation cannot encompass the mind of the creator. So how could he guide or advise the creator how to deal with other creations? For example, who should be pardoned or who should be sent to hell? This decision rests with the creator, who has the ultimate wisdom and knowledge about the purpose and deeds of all his creations. Therefore, a partner God has no role whatsoever in the running and regulating of the ultimate system created by one true God. The glorious Quran tells us that all prophets from Adam to Muhammad, peace be upon them, preached monotheism and condemned polytheism. For example, chapter 21, verse 25 of Quran reads, "We never sent any messenger before you without revealing to him, there is no God but me, so serve me." So monotheism, that is belief in one God alone, has been the essence of faith in the sight of God under all ages. Polytheism, that is plurality of God, is a concept contrived by misguided mankind under different pretexts to justify their false assumptions. All prophets were guided by God alone to preach monotheism because, as creations, they could not be guided on their own. This fact is explained in chapter 10, verse 35 and 36 of Quran in the following words. "Say, can any of your partner gods show the way to the truth? Say, God shows the way to the truth. Is someone who shows the way to the truth more worthy to be followed, or someone who cannot find the way unless he himself is shown? What is the matter with you? How do you judge?" Most of them follow nothing but assumptions. But assumptions can be of no value at all against the truth. God is well aware of what they do. In the light of facts highlighted in these verses, it is clear that God alone guides all human beings to the right path. Those human beings who think that someone other than God can guide them to the right path are grossly misguided, because their belief is based on false assumptions and not the truth. Polytheism in all forms is condemned in unequivocal terms in chapter 22, verse 62 of Quran, and the following words. It reads, so it will be, because it is God alone who is the truth. And whatever else they invoke is sheer falsehood. It is God who is the Most High, the Most Great. God provides numerous arguments against polytheism in the glorious Koran so that mankind may take heed. Some of the verses are explained in this segment for reinforcement purpose. Chapter 21, verses 22 and 22 of Quran read, "Have they chosen any gods from the earth who can give life to the dead? If there had been in the heavens or earth any gods but him, both heavens and earth would be in ruins. God, Lord of the throne, is far above the things they say." These verses challenge human wisdom by highlighting the fact that God alone gives life to the dead. It further argues that in case there were more than one God, the heavenly system would be in ruins because each God would be trying to influence the working of nature in his own style. The fallacy of polytheism is challenged from a different perspective in chapter 22, verse 73 of Quran in the following words. "People, here is an illustration, so listen carefully. Those you call on beside God could not, even if they combined all their forces, create a fly. And if a fly took something away from them, they would not be able to retrieve it. How feeble are the petitioners, and how feeble are those they petition." This verse questions the wisdom of all polytheists by arguing whether any false gods they worship have ever created even a fly. Definitely no evidence exists ever in human memories where a false god who is a creation has ever created a living being even as worthless as a fly. So God, the only creator, rebukes that both the false gods and their followers are frail and worthless. The most important power of God is exhibited in the domains of giving life, death, and resurrection to various forms of creations. God challenges all polytheists that whether their false gods can give life, death, and resurrection to any other creation in the following words. Chapter 25, verse 3 reads, "Yet the disbelievers take as their gods things beneath him that create nothing and are themselves created. They can neither harm nor help themselves and have no control over death, life, or resurrection." Anyone who claims that a false god can give life, death, and resurrection to any other creation, whether a plant, an animal, or a human being, must provide evidence to this fact. Even if we grow a plant, no mortal being, whether a prophet, a saint, or a scientist, can give guarantee that he can make sure that this plant will definitely grow under all circumstances. Why? Because he knows that life and resurrection of even a plant or grass is dependent upon the will of God and not within the powers of any creation. This will of God is indirectly accepted under the plea of environmental factors that are beyond the control of any human being. Therefore, whether these are called environmental factors or uncontrollable factors, the fact remains that human beings or any other creation cannot control and regulate the behavior of such factors in absolute terms. This acknowledgement is an indirect confirmation of the fact that a supernatural force or power is the controller of such factors. The glorious Quran also provides examples of few prophets who were given miraculous powers to give life to dead creations with the command of God. For example, Jesus was bestowed with a miracle that with the command of God he could resurrect dead persons under certain circumstances and not as a matter of routine. This was because he was merely following commands of God to make that thing happen and not exercising his power. Otherwise, he could have raised all dead human beings to life. In a nutshell, even if a human being is given any miracle to resurrect a dead person, it is with the power and will of God and not by his personal power. So he can never become a partner God even in a miraculous situation. He still remains a servant and creation of God. This servant-master relationship is beautifully explained in chapter 18, verse 102 of Quran in the following words. Did they think that they could take my servants as masters instead of me? We have prepared hell as the disbelievers' resting place. This verse forecloses the possibility of any ambiguity in the mind of a rational and heedful person that any creations of God, even a prophet, could be a partner God in any manner. Still, if someone persists in disbelief, he is adamant to be fuel of hellfire because of his stubborn nature and false assumptions. A question may come into the minds of the audience that in spite of clear commands of God against polytheism as conveyed in all revealed scriptures, why do majority of mankind still falls in the trap of polytheism? The answer to this question lies in the contentious nature of mankind. For example, chapter 18 verse 54 reads, "In this Koran we have presented every kind of description for people, but man is more contentious than any other creature." Similarly, chapter 36 verse 11 of Quran further confirms this fact in the following words, "You can warn only those who will follow the Quran and hold the Merciful One in reverence, though they cannot see Him. Give such people the glad news of forgiveness and a noble reward." A critical study of these two verses proves that mankind is required to believe in the one unseen God on the basis of signs or evidence provided in the glorious Quran. This is the litmus test of life that will determine the success or failure of mankind on the judgment day. However, mankind is vehement and controversial in its behavior. Consequently, human beings persist in debating even the manifest signs of unity of God provided in the Quran on flimsy grounds. This contentious behavior towards discerning the truth leads mankind towards roads of darkness, where mankind looks for feeble arguments to justify their preconceived notions about the nature, existence, and powers of God. Resultantly, polytheism is practiced on the basis of false assumptions, such as 1. There should be some physical image of God to focus attention on God. 2. There should be some human being or other creation that should be used as a medium to approach God. 3. There is no harm in praising someone alongside God because we still hold God as a supreme deity. 4. Probably holy men, living or dead, can be used as a source of redemption for the sins of mankind. 5. Probably angels and jinn are powerful enough to influence God's decisions. 6. Probably prophets are the closest to God amongst mankind, so they must have powers to intercede before God as partners. 7. Probably human desires are too important to be fulfilled as rewards of worldly life from God. So there is no harm if spiritual obligations are ignored in the pursuit of worldly ambitions. But all these assumptions are baseless and contrary to the truth. This fact is explained in chapter 10, verse 36 of Quran in the following words. Most of them follow nothing but assumptions, but assumptions can be of no value at all against the truth. As already explained earlier, polytheism is not restricted to idol worship alone. Quran provides examples of numerous types of polytheism that is condemned by God so that mankind may avoid commission of this gravest sin in all forms and complexions. Let us explore the several types of polytheism that have been explained in the glorious Quran to avoid the hellfire. One form of polytheism is the belief that someone is a child or offspring of God. Naturally, when someone is conceived as a child of God, it is assumed that he possesses powers and attributes like God, and so he is worthy of praise and worship like God. Chapter 23, verse 91 of Quran reads, "God has never had a child, nor is there any God beside him. If there were, each God would have taken his creation aside and try to overcome the others. May God be exalted above what they describe. This verse explicitly denounces all claims that anybody, whether a prophet or a saint for example, could be offspring of God. For anyone who is like God must be eternal, neither created nor bound to die. This is the essence of Godhood, that forecloses the possibility of any creation to rival the one true God. Besides, even if for simplicity we assume that somebody is a created God, he could still meddle with the universal domain of God and may cause disruption in the cosmopolitan and earthly affairs. Since no such incident has ever happened in the annals of mankind since the creation of the universe, therefore all notions about the existence of a child God are false and baseless. This false assumption of misguided human beings is rebuked on another occasion in the glorious Quran in the following words. Chapter 43, verse 15 reads, "Yet they assign some of his own servants to him as offspring. Man is clearly ungrateful." In the light of wisdom provided by this verse, it is clear that all creations are servants of God, and all polytheists are ungrateful human beings because they worship a servant of God instead of a true and immortal God. Another form of polytheism that is mentioned in Quran is the false belief that prophets and angels could be partner gods in some manner. For example, the false belief that a prophet should be praised and held in reverence like God, or the notion that angels can influence God's decisions in some way. These false assumptions have been rebuked and condemned in the glorious Quran in several verses to invoke human wisdom. Chapter 3, verse 79 and 80 of Quran read, "No person to whom God had given the scripture, wisdom, and prophethood would ever say to people, 'Be my servants, not gods.' You should be devoted to God because you have taught the scripture and studied it closely. He would never command you to take angels and prophets as lords. How could he command you to be disbelievers after you had devoted yourselves to God?" These verses confirm that no prophet of God ever commanded mankind to worship and love prophets and angels like God, because he knew that any such act on his part would be a blatant lie, and the worst form of polytheism for which God may punish him severely. So the followers of various prophets on their own fabricated assumptions to make prophets as partner gods in different contexts to justify their polytheistic actions, and not on the basis of any teaching of a prophet. Quran confirms that on the judgment day, prophets will turn against such disbelievers and reject their worship instead of pleading any salvation for them before God. This fact is explained in chapter 19, verses 81 and 82 in the following words. "They have taken other gods beside God to give them strength, but these gods will reject their worship and will even turn against them." The wisdom provided in these verses is an eye-opener for all disbelievers who praise and worship prophets, saints, and angels in the hope of seeking their intercession on the judgment day. May God guide us to the straightest path to avoid polytheism so that we may avoid perpetual burning in the hellfire. On another occasion, the glorious Quran confirms that no human being should be under any false hope that those creations that appear to be very close to God, for example prophets and angels, can influence God's decisions in any manner. They are rather as dependent and fearful of God as any other creation. This fact is explained in chapter 17, verse 57 of Quran in the following words. "Those they pray to are themselves seeking a way to their Lord, even those who are closest to him. They hope for his mercy and fear his punishment. The punishment of your Lord is much to be feared." This verse forecloses the possibility of any false notion on the part of any human being that a prophet or angel can intercede on his behalf before God. The prophets and angels, even those assumed to be closest to God, are extremely fearful and obedient before God because they know that God is the creator and they are mere creations who can be punished by God for any reason. So, how could they ever dare to plead before God for the redemption of other sin? May God show us this rational path as it is ordained in the Koran to avoid polytheism under all circumstances. The flimsy argument that prophets and messengers could be partner gods on the judgment day is foreclosed with a clear rebuttal in chapter 5, verse 109 of Quran in the following words. On the day when God assembles all the messengers and asks, "What response did you receive?" they will say, "We do not have that knowledge. You alone know things that cannot be seen." This verse clearly proves the fact that since prophets will be unaware of the deeds of their followers, that is, their contemporaries and later generations, they would decline before God that they know about the deeds of men. This is natural because all actions are judged by their motives, and it is impossible for a man to exactly judge the intention of even his contemporaries' actions. What to talk of those who were born after a prophet's death? So when you don't know about the deeds of someone, how can you intercede on their behalf? In this segment, I'm going to discuss the clandestine form of polytheism, also called henotheism. It is a form of polytheism that may take several forms and complexions. The worst type is that someone believes in one God but also add other partner gods as co-sharers with God at a certain level. This is the worst type of polytheism that is developed and practiced by people of all faiths. It includes false beliefs that a prophet, a saint, or a spiritual man should be revered and praised alongside God, in the hope that he would remove curse and miseries from mankind in this world and life in hereafter. It is explained in chapter 12, verse 106 to 108 of Quran in the following words. Most of them will only believe in God while also joining others with Him. Are they so sure that an overwhelming punishment from God will not fall on them, or that the last hour will not come upon them suddenly when they least expect it? Say, "This is my way," based on clear evidence. I and all who follow me call to God. Glory be to God. I do not join others with Him. If we look at the practices of all religions of the world, we may notice that henotheism is present in all religions, even amongst the claimants of monotheistic religions also. For example, different sects in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism practice henotheism in a variety of manners under the false guidance of pseudo-priests without following the strict monotheism preached by Quran and earlier scriptures. The priest class always promotes such type of polytheism because it benefits their worldly goals. For example, when a priest tells his followers that a prophet or a saint can redeem mankind's sins before God, he tries to create an impression in the feeble minds of his followers that if one human being like a prophet or a saint can do such miracles, why can't he do the same thing at a lower level? So simple people are trapped in his henotheistic ploy and also start revering and praising him. He also becomes a master of his blind followers, and they start spending money and wealth on him in the hope of gaining salvation. This is how henotheism has become a norm amongst all the clergy and priest classes of all times. It is like a swarm, and majority of the people who are trapped in it can never come out of it due to its strong political clout. The accumulation of wealth by the priest class while distracting human beings from the right path is explained in chapter 9, verses 34 and 35 of Quran in the following words. Believers, many rabbis and monks wrongfully consume people's possessions and turn people away from God's path. Tell those who hoard gold and silver instead of giving in God's cause that they will have a grievous punishment on the day it is heated up in hell's fire and used to brand their foreheads, sides, and backs. They will be told, "This is what you hoarded up for yourselves. Now feel the pain of what you hoarded." These verses make it clear that many priests in all ages have been turning people away from the path of God, that is, belief in one God, for acquiring personal wealth and property. All such types of priests belonging to any faith are disbelievers in the sight of God, and they are fuel of hellfire. May God grant us the wisdom to avoid the company and following of such priests. Another form of polytheism mentioned in Quran is the false belief that jinn are partner gods. Many people still believe that jinn and spirits can influence their fate without the will of God, so they must be feared and praised. The glorious Quran refutes this false notion in chapter 6, verse 100 in the following words: Yet they made the jinn partners with God, though He created them. On another occasion, chapter 37, verses 158 and 159 of Quran read, They claim that God has kinship with the jinn, yet the jinn themselves know that they will be brought before Him. God is far above what they attribute to Him. These verses denounce all false notions of treating jinn as partner gods. It is made clear that jinn are also creation of God, and they will be made accountable before God on the judgment day for all their actions, like all other creations. Another form of polytheism is the false belief that a holy man after his death can still influence worldly affairs, and so he should be praised and worshipped like the living God. This may take two classic forms. One way is to visit the grave of a dead human being and seek his mercy in worldly and spiritual affairs. The second form is to invoke his help alongside God in a religious ceremony as a partner God. These false notions are blatantly refuted in chapter 16, verse 20 and 21 of Quran in the following words: Those they invoke beside God create nothing. They are themselves created. They are dead, not living. They do not know when they will be raised up. These verses explicitly highlight the fact that a dead human being can never be a source of redemption for any living human being. The dead human being is completely unaware of what is happening in the living world. So how could he influence somebody's fate in the world or in hereafter? In the light of this common sense wisdom, God commands all human beings to put their trust in the living God alone. Chapter 25, verse 58 of Quran reads, Put your trust in the living who never dies and celebrate His praise. He knows the sins of His servants well enough. In the light of wisdom provided by this verse of Quran, it is incumbent upon all heedful mankind to desist from praising and worshipping a dead human being to avoid wrath of the living God. The conventional form of polytheism is deemed to be idol worship. It has been invoked from time immemorial. This practice is not shunned even in modern times, and many religious cults like Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism are indulged in this form of polytheism due to sheer ignorance and stubborn behavior. This form of polytheism is refuted in chapter 7, verses 194 and 195 of Quran in the following words: Those you call upon instead of God are created beings like you. Call upon them then and let them respond to you if what you say is true. Do they have feet to walk, hands to strike, eyes to see, or ears to hear? These verses make it clear that idols made of woods and stones are created by human beings to satisfy their false ego, to set rivals to one true God. However, God challenges the sheer foolishness of such polytheists, that how could an idol made of stone or wood can listen, see, or hear anything? If he is incapable of enjoying these basic attributes, how he can respond to human supplications? Another important form of polytheism is making one's personal desires and passion as a rival god. Most of us remain indulged in this form of polytheism even without reflecting that this is an unpardonable sin in the sight of God. There could be a long list of examples pertaining to this form of polytheism. For example, 1. The belief that worldly affairs and desires are more important than religious obligations, so spend more time on achieving worldly goals, and no time or very little time may be spent on religious matters. 2. The belief that studying and trying to understand Quran is not my domain, or I have no time to read Quran for my guidance due to my personal lifestyle. 3. I am not interested in any religion because it hinders with the achievement of my worldly goals, a typical argument put forward by an atheist to justify his worldly passions. This fact is explained in chapter 25, verses 43 and 44 of Quran in the following words. Think of the man who has taken his own passion as a god. Are you to be his guardian? Do you think that most of them hear or understand? They are just like cattle. No, they are further from the path. God declares such human beings as cattle who are devoid of any human intelligence. In the sight of God, they are far away from the right path. A polytheist who is indulged in his personal passion perhaps forget the fact that God created mankind and Jinn for one core purpose, and it is to worship one true God. Worship would include leading one's life according to the straight path revealed in earlier scriptures and culminated in the glorious Quran. Yet another form of polytheism practiced by strayed human beings is the false belief that someone can intercede before God on their behalf. This is one of the greatest follies that has deviated majority of human beings from the right path of monotheism. This fact is explained in chapter 10 verse 18 of Quran in the following words. They worship alongside God things that can neither harm nor benefit them, and say, these are our intercessors with God. Say, do you think you can tell God about something he knows not to exist in the heavens or earth? Glory be to him. He is far above the partner gods they associate with him. This verse rebukes false claims of any form of intercession made by ignorant human beings. God in an unequivocal terms commands that no one can intercede before God without his will. So invoking any other creation's help is a blatant form of polytheism in the sight of God, because it is a denial of mercy of God. The false belief that some creation, for example a prophet or a saint, will plead before God on the judgment day for salvation of his followers is rebuked in chapter 16 verses 86 and 87 in the following words. When the polytheists see the partners they joined with God, they will say, our Lord, these are the partners we used to invoke beside you. But the partners will retort, you are liars. And on that day, they will offer total submission to God. Their false deities will desert them. These verses reiterate the fact that on the judgment day, all false gods will desert their followers and deny that they ever told their followers that they should be worshipped as intercessors before God. So the only intercession is the mercy of God, and no creation can influence the will of God under any circumstances whatsoever. God elicits human wisdom in a different manner to make it clear that no protector can be stronger than God, so all human beings must seek protection of God alone. Chapter 29, verse 41 of Quran reads, those who take protectors other than God can be compared to spiders building themselves houses. The spiders is the frailest of all houses, if only they could understand. This verse makes it clear that in the sight of God, seeking someone's help in all spiritual matters is akin to relying on a spider's web, the weakest and the frailest house of all houses. Therefore, if anyone makes a false hope of any help towards any other creation, is practicing polytheism. All of us know that in many worldly affairs, we pin our hopes on a particular source, and in a large number of cases, the final help comes from some other quarter according to the will of God. Such experiences are an eye-opener for all of us to desist from relying on other creations as the ultimate source of help, because it is God alone who helps, and God is also the best planner and caretaker of all his creations. Another dimension of polytheism is the practice of loving and praising someone else more than God. This form of polytheism is so common amongst the followers of all faiths and religions that it can be called the standard brand of polytheism in all annals of time. People of all faith, under the wrong guidance of priest class and false logic, spend maximum of time in showing love and devotion to creations of God, like a prophet or a saint, in all their affairs. In religious ceremonies, they praise rival gods, either completely ignoring the one true God or spending a little time in the praise of one true God. In worldly matters, they listen and follow the worldly passions of their rival gods by spending their wealth on them instead of spending it in the path of God, as it is ordained in the Koran. But such an act of devotion is condemned by God because it is a worse type of polytheism. Chapter 2, verse 165 to 167 of Quran read, "Even so, there are some who choose to worship others besides God as rivals to Him, loving them with the love due to God. But the believers have greater love for God. If only those who do wrong could see, as they will see when they face the torment, that all power belongs to God and that God punishes severely. When those who have been followed disown their followers, when they all see the suffering, when all bonds between them are severed, the followers will say, if only we had one last chance, we would disown them as they now disown us. In this way, God will make them see their deeds as a source of bitter regret. They shall not leave the fire." These verses make it clear that the rival gods will forsake their followers on the judgment day, and the followers will curse their fate, pleading before God that they should be given one last chance to forsake their false gods as they have forsaken them. But no such plea will be accepted by God from these polytheists, and they will be thrown into the hellfire for the commission of their heinous sin. Another form of polytheism is the false belief that someone other than God can guide us to the right path. This is a little bit tricky form of polytheism, and many people are befooled by the priest class on this count. The best way to counter any wrong move of a spiritual leader is to ask him to show whether the right path he is pleading is provided in the glorious Quran or not. God has revealed Quran as the final guiding book for mankind. The right path is the only path that is explained and illustrated in the Quran, and not what is pleaded by a religious leader for his vested interest. A false god can never show the right path because he himself cannot find the right path without the will of God. This fact is explained in chapter 10, verse 35 of Quran in the following words. Say, can any of your partner gods show the way to the truth? Say, God shows the way to the truth. Is someone who shows the way to the truth more worthy to be followed, or someone who cannot find the way unless he himself is shown? What is the matter with you? How do you judge? This verse makes it clear that most of human beings follow the wrong assumptions that someone other than God can guide them to the right path as a partner God. But in reality, such assumptions have no valid basis, and they only lead mankind to the path of sheer ignorance and polytheism. This fact is reinforced in a different manner in chapter 10, verse 66 of Quran in the following words. Indeed, all who are in the heavens and on the earth belong to Him. Those who call upon others beside God are not really following partner gods. They are only following assumptions and telling lies. This verse declares all human beings as liars who either believe in rival gods or tell others to believe in rival gods for salvation of mankind. This verse forecloses the possibility of any form of polytheism for the heedful mankind. Another argument put forward by polytheists is that they are only following the footsteps of their forefathers because they believe that their forefathers were on the right path. However, this callous attitude is condemned by God in chapter 2, verses 170 and 171 of Quran in the following words. But when it is said to them, follow the message that God has set down, they answer, we follow the ways of our fathers. What? even though their fathers understood nothing and were not guided. Calling to disbelievers is like a herdsman calling to things that hear nothing but a shout and a cry. They are deaf, dumb, and blind, and they understand nothing. These verses prove that if someone follows his forefathers without reference to Quran and guidance from God, he is following vain desires. He is like a blind, dumb, and deaf person. He is guilty of the commission of the heinous sin of polytheism and cannot escape the hellfire because he is following the wrong footsteps of his forefathers. People may wonder why Quran only declares polytheism as an unpardonable sin. What about other types of disbeliefs that may be equally grave sins? The answer to this question lies in the fact that all forms of disbelief are based on polytheism. For example, the atheists, the agnostics, the deists, the henotheists, the hypocrite, etc. are all polytheists in the light of wisdom provided by Quran. The Quran declares an atheist as a person who has made his desires and passion as a rival God. The agnostic is confused about the existence of one real God or non-existence of God, that is nature as a rival God. The deist is confused about an active God or an inactive rival God. The henotheist worships one supreme God and many subordinate rival gods. The hypocrite only declares belief in one God, but secretly he denies it and adheres to many gods or his desires as rival gods. So these facts prove that polytheism is the order of the day with all disbelievers one way or the other. All disbelievers from all faiths, whether Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, atheists, Buddhists, etc., are fuel of hellfire if they practice polytheism in any form and manner as it is enunciated in the glorious Quran. Precisely speaking, polytheism is sharing of domain of God with a rival or a partner God. When someone tries to justify sharing of God's domain, he is in fact making others to believe that God is dependent upon the will of other creations. This dependency element gives birth to the concept of denial of Godhood. Anyone who is dependent and answerable to any other creation or rival God can never be a God in the true sense. This fact is explained in chapter 21, verse 23 of Quran in the following words: He cannot be called to account for anything he does, whereas they will be called to account. This verse makes it clear that God is not answerable to anyone, while all other creations are answerable before God. So how is it possible that a creation who is answerable before God can assume the role of a rival or partner God influencing God's decisions? Many confused persons believe that since God himself will honor prophets and saints to intercede before him, therefore seeking help of these creations is approved. But it is a gross misstatement, because only God knows whether he will assign any such role to his true servants on the judgment day and up to what extent. Even if we assume that such role may be assigned, it does not suggest that one should resort to polytheism on the basis of this flimsy argument for which he has no conclusive evidence. Polytheism is the only unpardonable sin in the sight of God, and all prudent persons must avoid its slightest complexion in all their actions. Chapter 4, verse 48 of Quran confirms it in the following words: God does not forgive the joining of partners with him. Anything less than that he forgives to whoever he will. But anyone who joins partners with God has concocted a tremendous sin. On another occasion, chapter 4, verse 116 reiterates this fact in the following words: God does not forgive the worship of others besides him, though he does forgive whoever he will for lesser sins. For whoever does this has gone far, far astray. These verses jolt the wisdom of any prudent person to avoid polytheism under all circumstances, for no plea whatsoever will save a person from the hellfire if he is declared guilty of practicing polytheism in the sight of God. Before summing up the discussion of polytheism, it is desirable to understand the attributes of worship to put the whole discussion in the right perspective. Many polytheists live in the false notion that they only worship God because they do not understand the true meaning and dimensions of the act of worship. Consequently, they commit polytheism in sheer ignorance and without second thought. But this indifferent attitude is not approved by God. For example, chapter 17, verse 36 of Quran reads, "Do not follow blindly what you do not know to be true. Ears, eyes, and heart, you will be questioned about all these." Now I discuss the elements of worship to enlighten the audience on this issue. Worship is composed of three elements. These include 1. Praise, 2. Prayer, and 3. Sacrifice. 1. Praise of God. Praise of God is highlighted in numerous verses of Quran. For example, chapter 28, verse 70 of Quran reads, "He is God, there is no God but Him. All praise belongs to Him in this world and the next. His is the judgment, and to Him you shall be returned." The praise of God is reinforced in another manner in chapter 17, verse 44 of Quran in the following words, "The seven heavens and the earth and everyone in them glorify Him. There is not a single thing that does not celebrate His praise, though you do not understand their praise. He is most forbearing, most forgiving." 2. Prayer before God. The fact that prayer only belongs to God is also mentioned in numerous verses of Quran. For example, chapter 13, verse 14 of Quran reads, "The only true prayer is to Him. Those they pray to besides Him give them no answer, any more than water reaches the mouth of someone who simply stretches out his hands for it. It cannot do so. The prayers of the disbelievers are all in vain." 3. Sacrifice for God. Sacrifice for the cause of God is a test of life. This fact is explained in chapter 2, verse 155 of Quran in the following words, "We shall certainly test you with fear and hunger and loss of property, lives and crops, but give good news to those who are steadfast." When we praise God, we pray before Him and we sacrifice for His pleasure. These actions are manifestations of different forms of worships. Quran contains innumerable references to this fact as explained earlier. Polytheism will therefore include all acts of worship where a mortal being is praised for spiritual powers like a god, he is prayed for help, and some form of sacrifice is offered to please that rival god. If we look at this postulate, it will transpire that followers of all religion observe such beliefs with conviction about their prophets, saints, and holy men. This is the worst type of polytheism, also called henotheism. The fundamental difference between polytheism and henotheism is that in the former one openly declares plurality of godhood, while in the later case he declares that there is only one God, but also believes in lower gods, deities, with powers identical to God. Thus, a henotheist is a polytheist as well as a hypocrite. This is probably the gravest sin of all, and unfortunately majority of the mankind is trapped in henotheistic practices under different pretexts. The glorious Quran sums up worship of God in the following words. Chapter 7, verse 29 reads, "Say, my Lord commands righteousness. Direct your worship straight to Him. Wherever you pray, call on Him. Devote your religion entirely to Him, just as He first created you, so you will come back again." A question may be asked by the audience that what is the best way to avoid polytheism? The answer to this question is to strictly follow the glorious Quran and avoid reference to any other source of religion created by men for their vested interests. Chapter 17, verse 9 of Quran confirms this truth in the following words. "This Quran does indeed show the straightest way. It gives the faithful who do right the good news that they will have a great reward." Many people put forward the flimsy argument that they are too busy to read Quran. However, They must not forget that Quran is the only source that can guide them on the true path of God. If they want the perpetual life and hereafter to be blissful, they must find time to read and understand Quran for their own benefit. For petty worldly gains and short life of unpredictable nature, we devote day and night. Then why can't we find some time to read and understand Quran? So there is no escape from the hellfire for those who do not prepare themselves for the judgment day. God will never listen to any excuse of human beings that in spite of the availability of a sublime revealed scripture, that is the glorious Quran, they still ignore it to follow their worldly passions, a form of polytheism. To further pronounce this vital point, I offer a simple illustration. Suppose there are two human beings living in this world. Mr. X is a devout, pious person in many virtues. He offers regular prayers and charity, speaks the truth, avoids all possible sins as far as humanly possible. But he is guilty of practicing polytheism in some manner. Mr. Y is a casual person in spiritual matters, although he still offers prayers and charity occasionally, tries to avoid some sins and follows some good deeds also. But he is a staunch believer in monotheism as ordained in the glorious Quran. In the light of wisdom provided by the glorious Quran, Mr. X, in spite of his overwhelming good deeds, will go to hell for the commission of the unpardonable sin of polytheism, while Mr. Y may stand a chance to be pardoned by God for his misdeeds. This simple illustration proves beyond a reasonable doubt that all the good deeds of a polytheist will go in vain and he will be sent to the hellfire by God under all circumstances. The case of Mr. X is akin to a situation where a student is asked to appear in a test and he is told that question number 1 is compulsory. Therefore, if this question is not passed, marks obtained in other questions will carry no weight. But he deliberately ignores attempting question number 1 and still hopes to pass the life of test. Can he be called a wise and a prudent person? The answer is no. He deserves the hellfire because he opted for it out of stubbornness and folly. May God guide us to the straightest path of monotheism and protect us from the hellfire. Now I sum up the main points in this monologue for reinforcement purpose in the following words. 1. Polytheism is the only unpardonable sin in the sight of God. It means everyone who practices polytheism in any manner is bound to become fuel of hellfire in spite of all his other good deeds. 2. Worship has 3 important elements that include praise, prayer, and sacrifice. Worship is only reserved for the one true God. 3. Polytheism usually involves a rival god or a partner god with the one true God. Its worst form is henotheism. 4. Except monotheism, that is belief in one God, all other beliefs and religions, whether henotheism, atheism, deism, agnosticism, idolatry, etc., are derivative forms of polytheism. 5. All the prophets preached the strict message of monotheism, that is belief in one true God. God has no son or offspring ever. 6. Polytheism is primarily introduced by the priest class of all faiths and religions to serve their vested interest for grabbing people's wealth under different pretexts. 7. Prophets never preached that they should be treated as interceders and partner gods in any manner. 8. Angels and Jinn cannot be partner gods. 9. Dead or living men of whatever stature cannot influence God's decision in any manner as partner gods. 10. One who follows his personal passions at the expense of teachings of Quran is a polytheist. 11. No partner god has ever created anything, rather they are themselves a creation of God. They have no power to influence any of God's decisions in both the worlds. 12. All assumed partner gods will condemn their followers on the judgment day, pleading that they never commanded their followers to resort to polytheism. 13. All creations are dependent upon God, but God is not dependent upon any of his creations for anything. This is the essence of unity of God. I conclude my monologue on polytheism with a prayer that Allah Almighty may bless this effort. Please do subscribe and share my channel for updates. It's absolutely free. Finally, do ask me questions to alleviate your concern about any related issue discussed in this monologue. Post your question in the comment section on my YouTube channel for a quick reply.